Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your attention for these next few minutes. I'm going to take a look at my clock here and okay, I just want to keep an eye on my time. First, before I get started, I'm Katie, I'm an addict, and I'm going to get going in a second here. But first, I just really have to hand it to V, who is doing a phenomenal job in the Alumni Services Coordinator position. And this job is now harder than it ever has been. Because now we're combining everything from pre-COVID world to post-COVID world, and V is doing that. So right on, girl, you're killing it and you're doing great. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that in you. So I am an addict. I was lucky enough to be a patient at Pavillon in April of 2016. And leading up to this meeting today, it was like, I still, thank goodness there is something much greater than my ego because I just got all in my head about this. I should be at this point in my recovery by now. It's almost 8 years, and I should be attending how many meetings and what's going to sound good to everybody and how am I going to help the most possible? And it's just like, Lord, relax. So I listened to some meditations before coming on here, and hopefully that will get me in a better headspace. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Yeah, all right. I have a few notes here. It's not a lot, but it's just to keep me on track. I am still an ADHD sufferer, I guess you could say, and that is unmedicated ADHD now, but it's all right. It's cool. I just got to keep on track this way. Yeah, it's part of my story. So I'll do a little bit on early childhood stuff, but I don't want to spend too much time on the pre-story. I guess just for starters, genetically speaking, and I guess familially speaking, I do have a family with a history of substance abuse issues and mental health issues. We also got some great stuff going on too. We got some really brilliant people. We did some really cool things family history wise. But yeah, we've got both substance abuse and mental health issues running through my family, as well as recovery. So my dad got sober when I was about 7 years old, and he went into the rooms of AA, got sober, and has been sober ever since. I like to bring that part up in my story because as a child at 7 or 8 years old, I really didn't have very many memories of my dad prior to him getting sober. He was just a hardworking alcoholic. He went to work. And I think, maybe his story includes going to bars after work or something like that. So I don't have as many memories of him prior to him being in recovery. But what I do have are memories of when he came around. And when my dad got into recovery, he started showing up in my life. And I say that to share that for anyone else out there who has kids right now, and you're maybe sitting there in treatment or in recovery yourself, or family members. And just to share that from my childhood perspective, I remember when that person showed up in my life, and I value that and look the relationship from that point on. So that's my experience. But if that gives anyone else a little bit of hope, there it is for you. So now, as a child, I really think I had a lot going on from the start. I was real obsessive over stuff. When I really got into something, I got really, really into it. And if that meant, a song I liked, it meant listening to it on repeat, like forever, until the tape cassette broke. Or it was if I really liked a boy, that would get really, for like an 8-year-old, that it was really excessive, right? Like really, really obsessive. And I really think, looking back on my recovery now, because later it would lead to alcohol and drugs and all these other things, I'm really grateful that my recovery took me to where it did, because if I had never picked up a drink or a drug from that point on in my life, from when the obsessions, and self-harm too. So I started self-harming when I was a little girl. And all those things, had I not even picked up a drink or a drug, all those problems still would have gone with me. I still would have had all this baggage and all this stuff to sort out. And had I never had a program of recovery to work through that, there would have been more problems down the road for me. So looking back on it now, yeah, there was uh, there was a lot of, dysfunction in the way that I grew up, and my family didn't raise me that way, right? I had a stable home. That my dad going into recovery really helped to bring more stability to the home. But we had everything we needed as kids and everything we wanted: places to go, vacations, family homes, and all that stuff. We had all this stuff, and I really, my parents really did their best. So I still, within all that support that I had a very sheltered life growing up. Still within that very sheltered life, that disease, as they say, it was getting ready. It was getting ready for me to meet me somewhere. So I guess I'll talk about the progression of the disease itself of alcohol and drugs right now. So now, alcohol for me, I experimented with it when I was in probably middle school or high school. And I got into it socially because it socially took some of the edge off of anxiety I had around friends, probably very common with what a lot of other people experience. And it was a social crutch, and I treated it as such. And when I got when I got to college, that was when drinking alcohol started to mess with my plans, let's just say. So I would go partying, and I mean, before I knew it, I was partying on almost every night of the week. And my friends were studying, and I was going to bars, and I would find the friends that would go out on Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then hang out with the friends that would go out on Thursday and Friday on different night. And I would skip class, and everyone else would be going to class, and I'd be skipping class and pretending that I was still in school. I did that for a while until I couldn't anymore. So college was like that with alcohol for a long time. I was on and off of academic probation. I made my way through college, but only barely. Like, I was on the last thread of, I guess it was some kind of academic probation until I finally graduated like 7 years later. So yeah, that was really all due to partying, because I would just party, 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 chase guys around, and all that. It was mostly just a social nightmare. I was really like that train wreck kind of a girl. It was true. So now the drugs, though. So I found out in college, when I started experimenting with drugs, some of these were legally prescribed. ADHD, I got the stimulants legally prescribed at first. I had opiates legally prescribed at first. All that stuff, when that started kicking off for me, and then I started experimenting with party drugs. That was when things started to get a little bit more shady, because that was when I think my disease was like, huh, wait, what? Like, there are these other things out there, and they make me feel this good. I'll chase my alcohol with drugs. So that's what I started doing. I started really pairing the two. And it wasn't before long that I started getting these sneaky little habits that I didn't tell any of my friends. Like, I would buy some drugs and then not tell anyone, or I would tell the person I was buying them from that I was going out with friends, and then just do them back alone in my apartment by myself, because I realized I really, really like to be alone with my drugs. Um, Now, I should have mentioned this before. So I am definitely an artistic person. I was an artistic child, musical, all the arts. That was my jam. But I didn't look into studying that in college or anything. But when I started when I drank alcohol, I got poetic, and I liked that. I liked the way I thought. I liked the way I spoke when I drank alcohol. And when I did drugs, I liked the way I thought artistically. So my creativity that had been pushed down for years and years of thinking, okay, I got to go get like a regular 9 to 5 job. I got to get into this like capitalist society and make a product out of my life. That like all this like suppressed art stuff that I really wanted to do with my life came forward when I started using drugs. So, I was getting drugs so that I could go back to my apartment and write, or try to make some music. And so that was later to be really hard to take the two of those things and separate them, meaning, like, take the drugs and alcohol away from the art, because I really thought that they were what was helping me to be a more artistic, more creative person. So yeah, that's really important to mention. Now, over the years, things got worse and worse. I said that I was not raised to be this kind of person, which I really say that in jest now, because the way that all that changed, I mean, I used to not hang out with people that did certain drugs. And eventually it got to the point where I was hanging out with anyone that had whatever drugs. And just the scene got sketchier and sketchier. And I remember saying things like, oh, well, I would never do heroin. I would never do heroin or hang out with anyone like that did that. And then when my pills ran out one time and I had some pretty bad withdrawals, I got some heroin. And then I remember saying when I was on heroin, I never would do meth though. Like, no, that's just, you see the people on the billboards with the meth, right? Like, no, that's not. And then when I did the meth, I would say, like, oh, but never crack. Because you know what somebody who does crack is like, right? And the story continues. So there is probably more of a list of drugs that I did do than what I didn't. And the real dependence for me came from opiates. So I was on a cycle of heroin, any kind of opiate pills that I could get, kratom, anything like that. I was on a cycle of dependence on that. And I would punctuate the withdrawal with party drugs on some weekends. So, I mean, I was really going hard for a long, long time. And so this was most of like my 20s and 30s, and I'm 42 right now. So what happened was that the party drugs, I guess, in conjunction with the withdrawals I was feeling because of opiate use, that all resulted in bouts of psychosis. So I would end up in the psych ward for a couple of days. They would, commit me, and then I'd have to wait a certain amount of hours before I could get out again. And this happened a couple of times. I'd have health issues from inhaling whatever it was that the drugs I was using was cut with, and I was allergic, and I would have epinephrine shots to revive me. It was nuts. I was just not, there was no way that I was going to stop. I was not interested in stopping. And in fact, I was really committed to the idea that I was going to die as an unseen artist. And that one day when I die, somebody is going to find my work. And maybe at that point, a few people will think it was kind of cool. And that's the way I thought that my life was going to be. I thought I was just, I'm an addict. I'm going to do this. I'm actually kind of having fun. And this is going to be my life. Even though, my health was starting to fail and the psychosis was starting to come, every few years or so, Katie's back in the psych ward. And I don't know. I don't really know what changed. I know that my using got to a point where I'd end up praying. And I never really prayed before that, but it was like I would use and then pray to be able to stop, to whatever, I don't know, on a bathroom floor somewhere. And the last time I was in psychosis in the spring of 2016, somewhere in one of those hospital rooms, I said to them that I needed help with the drugs. I mentioned that mental health issues have run in my family, and I was always kind of hiding behind all the mental health symptoms that came up in my disease, like without telling my family that it was actually drugs. So, what I mean is, like, everyone thought I was depressed and anxious, maybe bipolar, obsessive compulsive, ADHD, but nobody knew I was like using all these drugs all the time. So mental health issues were like what I was hiding behind in a way, because nobody can knock you for having mental health issues. That's like not cool at all, right? And so there was the stigma. I stigmatized myself by not admitting that I had a problem until I did. And I showed up at Pavillon. I was very fortunate to have my family supporting me in that. Of course, my dad's background in recovery, he knew exactly what to do. I didn't know that I was going to a place that would center me along the path of 12-step. I'm kind of glad I didn't know, because I had some prejudgments about that, even though growing up with my dad in the program, All I really knew, he didn't mention it a whole lot. He went to meetings a lot, and I knew that the people that he knew through the program were always really nice and cool. That is true. So that I can say was a plus for what I knew about the program before going into it. But I was thinking that rehab was going to be something like, well, first of all, I was like kind of entitled. I was like, but I wanted to go somewhere with palm trees. Like, come on, get real, So I went to this beautiful place, Pavilion, and I let me take a breath a second. I lost my train of thought, but went to Pavilion, got to go there, drink of water. This will help the squirrel brain. Okay. Now my brain is going, oh gosh, she's got almost 8 years. Everyone's going to think blah, blah, blah. Can't keep it together. So I had my doubts about the program. I had my doubts about a 12-step recovery place. I really liked the idea of going and having like a spa treatment. I liked the idea of yoga. I thought of this as not rehab, but rehabilitation. That's what I wanted to think of it, was rehabilitation. It's a prettier word, sounded nicer. So Pavilion, I think one of the most memorable things from that first experience, from the experience of coming into Pavilion, was that Chef Brian used my name when he said hi to me, and it was like the second day. And I know a lot of us have experienced that have been through Pavilion, and that meant so much to me because it meant that I was a name and a person, and not just a number at an institution. And I knew that a lot of people would know my name, my counselor, and everything, but Chef Brian, did he actually care that much to know and remember who I was based on a little tiny picture? And then that grew from there, like it really grew. It grew to like understanding that all the staff there just seemed really welcoming. And that was the place where I really needed to be. I needed to be in a place that would separate me from those people, places, and things for a while. I was stuck in a relationship that was both of us were using. It was a really bad and dangerous place that I was. And so, when I would leave Pavilion, I would leave that relationship, go back to live with my parents. I would have no job. Everything would start anew for me. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention on the Pavilion experience. I remember when I was there, it was like 2 weeks in, and I was pretty happy when I was there. I was just glad. I was also still coming off of the psychosis. I was in the psych ward 2 weeks before going to Pavilion, and the psychosis was fading a little bit. And if anyone knows what psychosis is like, it's very similar for me, for like there's some hallucinations and paranoia, and you think things are happening and they're really not. And so I thought there were some things, the cameras everywhere. I was thinking I was on I was on a movie or something, and that was kind of it, that trailed off as I was there. But anyway, week 2 or so, I was getting settled in, right? Getting a little more stable, not having the withdrawals anymore, and feeling a little bit more normal. And I remember like these little bumps started showing up on my face. And I was thinking, gosh, it must be that soap in there that I'm using. I don't never use that soap before, I guess. And what I ended up with this huge case of like I guess the recovery acne. I don't know. I don't know if anyone out there is experiencing that, but that's a real thing. I had years of piled up substance use, and your skin can just like, it can flare up. So I got some of that real interesting skin condition, like while I was there at Pavilion, which I laugh at that now, but it was really hard for someone, a self-harmer with OCD, to go through that. I had to rely on a lot of support for that experience. But anyway, the experience there, I continue to value I remember everyone that I was in treatment with, and I still do, and I think about them a lot. And still am connected to some of those women. And what a profound and lucky experience it was to be able to be at Pavilion. So they would give me these suggestions. I worked steps 1, 2, and 3 while I was there at Pavilion. And that was good. It was kind of like a little training session on what working the steps would be like in the real world. And so okay, if all working the steps in the real world is like answering questions about myself, that doesn't seem like that bad. I could probably do that out there in the real world with a sponsor. I could probably answer those questions and see what happened. I think for me, it was important to just remain curious and a little bit open-minded about it. I had judgments. The biggest fear I had about the steps and about the program, I was afraid they were going to take my identity. I was afraid I was going to get washed across with this, like I thought they were telling me, like, you're a nobody, you don't matter, you're just there to work the steps and that's it, keep your head down. And that's not at all what the program is about. I learned that the program is about helping me find the real me. The program is about helping me to uncover who I've been hiding so much of my life. So when I started working the steps, taking the suggestions outside of Pavillon once I left, some really awesome things happened. And it started happening when I was there. When I think about it, my creativity started coming back when I was right there at Pavillon, just in those few first weeks of not having the toxins in my system. So I started seeing and thinking beautiful things again. And I started thinking like, oh, I just heard a melody on that breeze, or I just thought, hey, this would be a really cool idea for an art project. And these were things that, before, like I always would have just attributed, well, I could only sell that artwork if I were on drugs. I could only write that song if I were really, really, really high. And so, it slowly started coming back into my life. So I went to an IOP, intensive outpatient, after leaving Pavillon. I stayed in that, and that was like group therapy 3 times a week with a lecture. And the group therapy was cool. I stayed in that for almost a year. What was really neat about the IOP, and that I would do it again in a heartbeat if I were in that situation, would be because I was able to meet people in the Charlotte. I live in Charlotte, by the way. So I was able to meet people in the Charlotte area who were very close to my range of recovery. So, we were all in therapy together. So we're all together in that. And it was cool because we would have to attend certain amount of meetings. And, you'd see people and meet people around there that were going through the same things. So that was really helpful doing the IOP. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days. And I did it. I didn't think of it as 90 days though. I planned it week by week. That it was easier for me to break things down. Week by week, I could do this. I could say, okay, what am I going to do Monday through Friday, Monday through Sunday, whatever. And if I liked a meeting I attended one of those days, then I attended that meeting again the following week. And before long, that 90 and 90 was over. It really kind of flew by. It was a lot of hard work, but it flew by really quickly. Eventually, I settled into what I still consider my top choice of recovery. Like my plan these days works best with 3 meetings a week, and that does include a meeting like tonight. Like even if I'm sharing my story, that's fine. That counts as one of my 3. That's ideal. It's not always that I get there, especially lately, but that's my ideal. That's where I feel most in the groove there. So anyway, I got a sponsor, and this is also another plus with Pavillon, or that relates to Pavillon. So when you meet with V, most people when they meet with V toward the end of their stay, but some whenever you meet with V for alumni services paperwork, she'll give you a contact list that has a list of alumni volunteers who are there to either help you find meetings. They may be there to get, in your hometown to get some coffee, or potential sponsor. It could be just a support contact, someone to reach out to and say, hey, hello. But, they gave me a list. And I think the top person on the list I called turned out to be my sponsor. And that person actually is here tonight. She's on the camera, Kathy C. And she's one of the most important people in my life. And Kathy was my sponsor for the first year and a half or 2. And then we took a break, and then now she's back my sponsor again. So I value that time in recovery where I work the steps with Kathy as one of the cornerstones of my recovery. And we talked all the time. I checked in with her every day, but we met once a week at her house. And we would go to her home group together and have lunch. And she would make lunch for me, y'all. I was really spoiled. She was so great. Kathy, how many lunches I owe you? I don't even know. 52 at least. So it was just a wonderful experience. I look on it with happy memories. So if I have time, I'll expand upon working the steps, but I want to be sure that I get some other important stuff in by the end of tonight. I did get a home group. I've always been kind of I kind of jump around. That goes to the probably also to the ADHD, but also to just I believe that each of us in the skin that we are in can have a individualized program of recovery. And that can mean whatever that means. It's just the only thing I got to do is be honest with myself. Am I doing what I need to do to stay clean and sober today? And like that could look very different from what I do and from what somebody else does. And that's like, I don't judge, I don't get into anybody else's business. If somebody wants to do 7 meetings a week and that's their thing, good. If somebody does fewer than I do, good. Like just do your thing, whatever. So I feel that way really strongly about that, independent, but just be honest, right? Be honest with myself. So I've worked the steps in AA. I've worked the steps in NA. And I'll in a few minutes, I'll talk about some other programs of recovery that I've used in my life to work on some of those targeted issues that came from earlier childhood, like the obsessions and the self-harm. Briefly, I would like to talk about spirituality and how that grew through the years that I've been in and around the rooms. For me, I really have always had kind of an amorphous, changing. I can't understand or define whatever it is that I call God or don't call God. I don't know. I don't even think there probably are words for it. The other night, or early morning, I was up and I was thinking about it, and I was like, I think I'm more comfortable calling it a greater power than a higher power, just because there is more than this ego. There is. And again, thank goodness there's more than this ego. And that's greater than me. So when I look to that, anytime when things have been hard, I've got a wonderful life right now. But there have been times that have been really hard and really stressful. Family emergencies, deaths in the family, suffering, pain, all these things I've been through in these years of recovery. And when I remember to lean on a source greater than myself and other than myself, I get everything I need. I get all the help. I get all the reassurance I need. And for me, spirituality, it goes with keeping just a little bit of an open mind, and listening to other people share in the rooms. I would love even more than to talk tonight to hear everyone in this room share a little bit about themselves. I would love that more, because I'm going to hear something there I'm going to relate, and I'm going to pick up on that, and I'm going to carry that with me. And I'm really just not, this isn't about me. This is like, honestly, I'm just a product of a lot of meetings this one body has been to. And I'm just kind of like, I'm going with the flow, but I mean, I'm just a product of the program, and I've been successful because I followed suggestions. I'm just one voice, and I value so much hearing someone else's perspective on spirituality. I value people who do it from a science perspective. I value the people who do it, and I'm just saying that there are so many things to learn from other modalities, of other spiritual modalities. And I know that sounds kind of scattered, but I mean, I'm just telling you, I'll go anything from putting crystals on my arms to see what happens to going to church. All of it to me is really rad. All of it's really cool and fun. And like, I like to look for the beauty in spirituality. I like to look for the beauty in religion. There is a divine connection that comes sometimes from creative work and the spiritual world that I believe is real. And I can only get there, the real place, if I'm clean and sober. I talked about that, like I was able to access that you know, my creativity when I was in a really dark spot using drugs and alcohol. But if any of you have seen the movie, The Little Mermaid, and Ariel the mermaid trades her gorgeous voice to the sea witch in order to walk on land. And the sea witch is looks a lot like Ariel. She's beautiful, but she's got this black heart, and she's stolen Ariel's voice. And I really feel like that was like me and the disease in my art. I feel like that sea witch walking around with a fake voice was really, that was what that was. Now in recovery, like, I mean, I can't sing like Ariel. I'm no, but now in recovery, I've got what I've meant to have. It's limited because I'm just one human being. So that keeps me humble. But it's beautiful what I have, my gifts inside. And if there's anything that I would love to leave with anyone tonight that's listening and open to it, if you have a dream, whether you're there at Pavillon right now or you are home, and you have a dream and you've had it and it won't leave you alone, the best way that any of us is ever going to get close to that dream is going to be clean and sober. It's going to be clean and sober. And this program is here in place to help give us that. Because I'm happiest when I'm sharing and when I'm open, and when I'm happiest when I'm clean and sober and able to share that and share and express and talk to you, and I'm happy with myself and I love myself because I'm doing what I love, and it all feeds on itself. So yeah, I think like if you're there, if you're on campus now and you're starting to wake up a little, that's what it's there for you. That life is not just a, you know, life is not just this whole recovery thing is not a death sentence. You know, it's not a just, hey, it's the end of the party, it's a death sentence. No, the program is a survival, it's a survival manual. It's how to survive clean and sober. And then once we get more into the steps, we can really start adding in these deeper, cool things that make our lives rich. And we can start waking up to those things that are already there. I'm going to probably stop here pretty soon, but really quickly, I will talk about briefly about where my recovery is now. I've just started with my sponsor, Kathy, attending a new, what I'm going to call my new home group. It's on Zoom. So I do a lot of Zoom still. Again, I'm real copy and paste, do whatever recovery works for you right now. Let it change, whatever. What's working for me right now is a lot of Zoom, a lot of recorded speaker meetings. But anyway, Kathy and I are doing ACO. I hope that's okay with that. I just told everyone that about Kathy. Sorry, Kathy. I didn't realize that. So ACOA, adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families. This is another 12-step program, and this is meant to address emotional sobriety. So this is deeper work. Over time, many people that have years of recovery will flock to these other programs. I've also worked the steps in CODA, which is Codependence Anonymous. These are all things. I would say I kept an eye out. I was working the steps in NA and AA, and then years after that, I was still having problems with codependency. I was still having problems with being compulsive with my emotions, and that would have negative effects in my life. So these other programs are here to help refine the rest of my journey. And so I have worked the steps and I'm continuing to work the steps in these other programs. ACOA is just starting this new workbook study that I'm going to be doing. And so I'm going to work the steps on some of this emotional sobriety stuff that, I mean, I am truly a work in progress. I love the steps. I love the steps because it doesn't matter, you know, how long-term my recovery is. I can get at different angles of the disease. It's kind of like treating it with brand new medicines that cost nothing. So ACOA, adult children of alcoholics, it's a thing. And these extra programs have been instrumental. I will say that when working these other programs. There are so many other programs out there too. There are Overeaters Anonymous. There's Gamblers Anonymous. There are programs for almost any kind of thing you can be addicted to. And I've always attended these recovery meetings in conjunction with my NA and my AA. So I go to all the NA and AA at the same time as I claim a home group in the other program of recovery. So that's just to remind myself that no matter how like advanced I can get and how I can overcome a lot of my codependency, I still need to remember that drugs and alcohol are still part of my disease. And I have to remember that needs continuous attention and need to stay humble about that. So that's all I got on that. I guess that's all. I guess it's a pretty fair place to stop. If anyone has questions, I could find places to expand, but I'll take a drink of water and hand it back over to V, I guess.
I'll let you take a drink of water, but how about you explain to everybody where you disappeared to?
Oh, okay. Okay. Drink. Okay. Okay. I'm really glad I brought this water up here because I think the last time I shared my story a few years ago, I forgot the water. And by the end, I was like, broke. So, um, so I had the chance, I left my marriage when I went to Pavillon. I had started from scratch. And I will say that my program of recovery led me into a new world of a few years into being clean and sober. I met who is now my husband. And so I was remarried. We also just in 2022 had our son. So that was why I forgot to mention all the service work for Pavillon. Oh, that was a big thing that I wanted to mention. Maybe I'll have time for that in a bit. But doing service work for Pavillon was like the service work I did in recovery. And there's V can tell you all the ways to be of service. But anyway, I worked for Pavillon and then I took leave because I had a baby. So now I'm a full-time mom, part-time I do work for Pavillon, but it's only a few hours a week remote, just alumni services support from Charlotte. So I do that, but other than that, I'm just busy with this little guy. But yeah, it's been, man, it's been real. I went back to school for a little while in recovery. It was really cool. I got to make the good grades that I never made when I went to college the first time. But man, nothing will teach you like a toddler. Like they have lessons all day long for me as a person. So it's been great. It's been a joy. Also, my husband is in recovery. And so that's another cool, interesting aspect of our lives. At night, we do 10th step at dinner together. It's like a mini 10th step. We just talk about any resentments or gratitude. We talk about our gratitudes, resentments, wins, all that stuff. And it's cool. So it's a great life now. But I'm cognizant of the fact that I wouldn't have any of it if I hadn't had just that shred of the ability to ask for help, and that help was given to me and I accepted it. And I really just owe everything to everyone else in the rooms because that's who I'm speaking to now. I would be all alone just talking to myself without all y'all. And that would be a lot like the old days. So yeah, that's a good question. I have from personal experience. I don't know if Kathy, my sponsor, I don't know if you remember this, but I was real anxious to go ahead and make some amends before I got to that step in the very beginning. And I went and apologized to someone I used to dog sit for stealing their pills, like right away. And I remember Kathy was like, stop talking. So I would say working the steps up because those things we get to when we get to the amends, we're ready when we're that part of the process. We talk to our sponsor about that on purpose because our sponsor might offer us information like you might want to do a different form of amends with this person because you could end up in jail. that's an example, right? Like we could find other ways to make amends so that we are not harmed or others are not harmed. And so that was important. Now I got really lucky with that one. The person I shared that with was very cool. But it, that could have been scary. I could have been held legally responsible, and I would have been, and I would have had to deal with those consequences. And so we found a better way to mend that situation. But I would say that with amends, I think the most, besides not skipping ahead and doing the amends, like trying to do that amends work myself, and when it's not in good time, I would say that probably the most important thing about my amends making process was releasing expectation. Because I have in my mind the thought that I'm going to reach out to, I had in my mind, that I was going to reach out to some folks and really get those relationships back. Um, the truth was I had been long gone from some of those relationships, and those people had long moved on. And so some of my amends, I didn't receive responses. I wrote some out to some people. Some I didn't receive responses when I really would have hoped to have rekindled friendships. Like, oh, don't you want to know me now? I'm clean and sober now. It's all better. So that set me up for some disappointment, having an expectation around how someone else would receive that amends. And then I eventually learned over time that really the amends is for us. The amends is for our personal healing on that. And we accept, when we really truly make an amends, we accept that we've done our best. We do what we can to fix it, but from that point on, it's no longer ours. It belongs to that person. That's theirs, and their feelings and how long they may need to process that. That's theirs, and we have to respect that. I have to respect it. So, yeah, that on amends. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. There's so many different ways to make amends, I learned. It doesn't always necessarily need to be something that is direct communication between myself and someone else. If communicating with that person might hurt either one of us or complicate anyone's life more. And so there are other ways to make amends, and that can be something discussed with a sponsor. There are some amends that we make to those who are no longer with us. So that's another thing. And learning that sometimes it's making a donation, there's lots of different ways. And I would just say that if anyone is anxious about that part, it's very normal to be anxious about that part. But it's also like, remember where we are, and if we're still working the first few steps, that's where we are, because we need to build on that before we get to the point of amends. So especially the resentments and all that, step 4, 5 have to come before that. So we can get real clear with ourselves. Yeah.
Um, do you want to clarify just a little bit on how steps 4 and 5 contribute to that, just slightly?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, that was super vague. So, um, well, okay, I'll use myself again as an example here. Like when I worked the steps the second time in NA, I had gone through all the things that I resented, right? So in step 4, I'm going to list all my resentments, find my place, work through that, and also find a way that I can find my character defects and see, okay, what's at work here. So the second time I did that with people mostly, my first time working the steps. Second time around, I'm like, all right, I'm going for the institutions now. I am angry at such and such institution for this. I am angry at this country for this. I am angry at this former president or whoever for this. And I let it rip with that kind of stuff. And so, like, I think that if I carry, whether it's institutions or whether it's individuals, if I carry a lot of resentment still about those people, those institutions, those situations, those things outside myself, if I carry that with me, how are later on my amends going to look? Really, how am I going to get to a really pure level of ability to make amends if I'm really still angry about this stuff over here? So, like, this is the steps for me are a chance to let all that go, let all that anger stuff go, because if I'm in an angry state, I'm just defensive over some stuff. I hope that helped zero in a little bit on how how 4 and 5 are important, and they feel good. It feels good. It's like shaking up a can of soda. It's like I got there to Pavilion and the can of soda was completely like ready to burst. And like amends is not like just open the can of soda no, the step 4, the listing our resentments and all of that, and step 5 is not just releasing the can of soda everywhere all over the world. It's just like a slow, like, here you go, here, over time. A lot easier to handle that way, I think.